Welcome to Viral Recaps. Today I'm going to explain a thriller and action movie called Plane from 2023. Spoilers incoming. Let's get right into it. The movie opens with a pilot named Brodie Torrance rushing through the airport as he's running late for his flight to Tokyo. While getting through the security check, he receives a call from his daughter Daniela. They plan to spend the New Year's Eve together and she's worried he won't make it in time, but he assures her there'll be no delays and he still has 18 hours left to complete the flight and get home. Brodie manages to reach the plane on time and meets Samuel Deli, his co-pilot. While they're waiting for the flight officer to make his visit, they get to know each other a bit. The captain sees the route of the flight and is concerned about the bad weather conditions they have to face. At that moment, the flight officer enters the cabin to confirm that everything's fine and to ask the pilots if they have any questions. Captain Torrance then suggests an alternative route to avoid the storm. However, the flight officer wants to save money on fuel because the plane has only 14 passengers. As they're unable to contradict, the pilots agree to follow the route, hoping that the weather will clear by the time they get there. Once he leaves, the flight attendant, Bonnie, enters the cabin to introduce herself. She then tells the captain he's needed in the jetway, so he goes to check what's going on. There, he meets with a police officer who requests to be let on board with a refugee named Louis Gaspar, who was charged with homicide 15 years ago. He has to be extradited to Toronto. The captain considered that a handcuffed criminal would make everyone on board uncomfortable, so he tells them to take the last row of seats in order to keep them away from the passengers. Torrance then heads over to chit-chat with the other flight attendants, telling them about the refugee. He advises his crew to interact as less as possible with him, just as a safety measure. Then, they greet the passengers on board. They're all very different from each other. Amongst them is a rude businessman named Matt Sinclair, a couple, and two friends named Katie and Bree, whose places have been taken by the officer and Gaspar. One of the flight attendants, Maria, tells them to sit a few rows ahead. The girls quickly realize what's going on upon seeing his handcuffs, so they try to take a picture with him, but Gaspar notices this instantly and tells them not to. Once the plane finally takes off, everything seems perfectly fine and the pilots talk about their families. Then, things take a sharp turn when they enter the storm, which is far stronger than they've expected. The captain tells everyone to fasten their seatbelts and contacts the air traffic control to request a change of the route, but doesn't receive an answer. As they go deeper into the storm, suddenly a thunder strikes the plane, causing a massive turbulence. Torrance then leaves Deli in control to check on the passengers. While doing so, Sinclair mocks him for being a bad pilot, which is pretty stupid considering that Torrance is just a pilot, not the god of thunder. Anyways, the captain calms everyone down and tells them everything's under control. Just then, a second thunder strikes the plane, causing him to hit his head and bust his eyebrow. Torrance then tells everyone to stay in their seats and fasten their seatbelts. He tries his best to reach the deck and takes back over the flight. With the plane now completely fried, the entire power and communication are cut off. The pilots try their best to contact someone and find a solution, but of no use. The plane's now running purely on battery, and they have exactly 10 minutes to find a place for an emergency landing. Meanwhile, the police officer drops his phone on the ground and although instructed to stay put, he decides to leave his seat to take it. Upon seeing this, one of the flight attendants, Isabella, tries to get him back to his seat. Just then, a third strike shakes the whole plane and sends them both flying, causing them to die on the spot. Coming back to the pilots, they slowly grow desperate as there's only water beneath them. Just before they try to land in the sea, Torrance spots land ahead. They only have 90 seconds left before they run out of battery and crash. Just when the timer hits the 10-minute mark, they see a road that looks suitable for landing. With a lot of hope and many difficulties, the captain manages to land successfully. Everyone feels relieved and they quickly leave the plane as it's still very hot and full of fuel. At first glance, the pilots think they might have landed somewhere in the Philippines. In the meantime, the SEO of the airline, Terry Hampton, conducts an emergency meeting along with David Scarsdale, a former Special Forces officer who leads the rescue operation. He mocks the flight officer for not letting the pilots take the alternative route and go around the storm. He also congrats him on saving $12,000 in fuel with the cost of human lives and a plane. The crew discusses all possible ways to find the plane's location. In the following scene, Bonnie shares her concerns about Gaspar with the captain and gives him the keys to his handcuffs, which she took from the dead officer before getting off the plane. Then, Torrance and Deli try to figure out more specifically where they might have landed, and they find out it's on Holo Island. Deli is horrified upon discovering that. He tells Torrance that this island is ruled by heavily armed separatists and criminals. There's no government or police there, meaning that they might end up dead as soon as they're discovered. The pilots agree to keep this a secret from the passengers in order not to cause panic. Then, the captain goes inside the plane to wrap the dead bodies. He takes the officer's gun with him just in case. After unsuccessfully trying to get the plane's power back up, there's only one option left. Torrance recalls flying over some kind of facility before they landed. He hopes that they have a phone or a radio there so that he calls for help. Two of the passengers offer to accompany him, but he refuses, saying that Gaspar has already volunteered for the job. The captain is worried to leave him with everyone else while he's gone, so he figured out that'll be the best option. He couldn't be more right though, because while on their way to the facility, Gaspar reviews that he's an ex-soldier from the French Foreign Legion. As they're talking, Gaspar has a sudden change of heart and flees. In the meantime, one of the villagers runs to meet with Junmar, the leader of the whole island. He tells him about the plane and where it might have landed. Junmar quickly concludes it couldn't be the army, because otherwise, he would have been notified by his informers. Then he tells one of his men to find the plane as quickly as possible. Coming back to Torrance, he's already in the facility and finds a phone. He contacts the airlines immediately to explain the whole situation, but since they were getting prank calls all day about it, they just don't believe him. The captain then gives his last shot by calling his daughter and telling her everything, including their location. He instructs her to call the airline headquarters and tell them to send a rescue team. Then, while still on the phone, he suddenly gets attacked from behind by a stranger. After wrestling for a while, Torrance manages to break his neck, killing him instantly. He catches his breath for a few seconds and then quickly hides upon hearing gunshots. Fortunately, it turns out to be Gaspar, who hands him a rifle. On their way downstairs, they come across a camera and a few passports. Gaspar plays one of the recordings, and it's reviewed that every foreigner who comes across this island is tortured on camera. Then, the criminals demand money to spare the foreigners' lives. The duo then realizes what's about to happen with the passengers, and they quickly rush back to the plane with the stranger's pickup. They arrive too late though. One of the girls ditches her boyfriend and tries to run away, but she instantly gets shot. Junmar then ruthlessly beheads the poor guy, and they ask Deli where's the captain, to which he replies with an honest answer and says that he went to search for help. Torrance tries to interfere, but Gaspar stops him from doing so as he knows it's impossible to fight against a whole army. The terrified passengers are then loaded on a bus and everyone leaves except for two of Junmar's men, who were left behind to take everything valuable from the plane. Infuriated, Torrance storms towards them, takes both of them down, and asks where they're taking the passengers. The criminal says they'll be taken to a warehouse in Dangelit village. The captain then goes inside the plane and finds out that while he was gone, Deli somehow managed to fix the electric system. He locates the village on the map and leaves a message in case a rescue team discovers the plane. He writes on his uniform where the passengers are held hostage. In the meantime, Gaspar took the two criminals to the woods and shot them. Coming back to the airline headquarters, the rescue team finally discovers the plane thanks to Daniela, who passed all the information as instructed. Then, Scarsdale wastes no time and sends a Black Ops team to the rescue. In the next scene, the duo's already at the village to save the passengers, who turn out to be guarded by two sloppy guards that Gaspar easily takes down with a hammer. Everyone quickly gets on the bus, but the entrance is blocked by many of Junmar's men, and trying to drive off through them wouldn't end too well. The captain then decides to give himself up as a distraction. This doesn't turn out to be a very good idea though, but leaving a message in the plane surely was a great one, as the Black Ops team discovered it once they've arrived. They come to the rescue just before he gets shot in the face. Then everyone gets on the bus and they drive back towards the plane. Junmar gets extremely infuriated by the situation and sends all his remaining men to hunt them down. Now, Torrance and his people know they have to get off the island as fast as possible in order to stay alive, and the fastest way is by boarding the plane again. Once they arrive, the captain convinces everyone to trust him for one last time and asks the rescue team to buy him some time as he has to fix one of the brakes first. A few moments later, an intense gunfire battle ensues, and both parties try their best to overpower the other. Once the plane is ready to take off, Torrance makes a run and enters despite getting shot in the leg. Then the Black Ops team follows, but Gaspar decides to stay on the island because he'll avoid jail by doing so. Anyways, the plane is now building up speed to take off while taking bullets from all sides. Moreover, Junmar and one of his men are preparing to use a rocket launcher. Thankfully, Gaspar is still around and shoots the guy, causing him to miss the shot. Torrance's face of relief is priceless when he sees the rocket barely missing the plane. That doesn't last for too long though, because Junmar picks it up again, but the captain has no intentions of stopping. He takes off the plane right through him and his car. With the help of the rescue team, they find an airport near them and barely manage to reach it with their totally destroyed plane. The captain once again successfully lands the plane, but this time in a normal and much safer place. Torrance is then applauded by all passengers and the movie ends as he exits the plane last. Hey, if you enjoyed this recap, please consider subscribing and leaving a like as it helps the channel a lot. Thanks for watching and take care.